Ni hao. I would like to thank the whole organizing team. Tao Yao. Thank you, Sarah and Waldraut, for inviting me to this wonderful conference in this amazing town. And I would like to thank Swissnex for spending part of my travel costs. For more than 20 years, online and offline applications of hypermedia technology have combined text, image, video, animation, and sound into a total work of art, a Gesamtkunstwerk. Hypermedia applications comprehend online and offline productions like Laserdisc, Photo CD, CDI, CD-ROM, DVD-ROM, as well as kiosk systems or mobile technologies like handheld guides. Often produced for museums, the digital masterworks of applied art are icons, signs, and symbols of and for our digital and digitized cultural heritage. And there are important relics of the Neolithic age of multimedia. But it is a pity that later generations will have no access on these marvelous Silverdisc classics, as well as early kiosk systems and early museum web pages. At the moment, most of the CD-ROMs are still readable. But it's only a matter of time before one of the next computer generations disallows the access to the hypermedia classics. To use old CD-ROMs on Apple Macintosh computers, the classic environment has to be installed. Since the Apple Mac computers are running on Intel processors, the installation of classic is technically infeasible in defiance and of diverse experiments with emulator programs. This is the reason why you see me here standing with this old-fashioned Mac PowerBook G4 Mac USS version 10.4.11. Most of the archives or museum libraries that have collected hypermedia formats like CD-ROM, CDI, or Laserdisc no longer have computer systems running with the old specifications. Therefore, they have stopped collecting these formats. Meanwhile, the technical specification of these relics are powerful signs of the powerlessness of the next computer generation who will disallow access to the hypermedia classics. But the soaring loss on accessibility is only one problem we have to solve. Hypermedia applications are hybrids. They are masterpieces of sampling information and cultural content in different forms by combining different strategies of dramaturgy, navigation, and design. Therefore, the similar objective targets can create completely different solutions. The results can look like an interactive timetable as on Atlas of Archaeology, like a comic novel as on Navegar describing the discovery of the world by the Portuguese voyagers, like dancing words as the whispering voices of the ghosts on Bruno Taut, like a walk in the park in the castle woods of Varnas, in the park on Museum Insel Hombroich, or like a jogging avatar in the castle woods of Varnas. Previous efforts to construct a typology for such hypermedia applications are often a mixture of content and application area. They condemn to failure because they have disregarded this variety of possible applications. So a simple classification cannot follow all terms and conditions. There are a lot of questions. Let's concentrate in a few. What can we learn from the pilgrim fathers of multimedia for the future? Why it is so difficult to describe and analyze the interplay of content, navigation, and design of hypermedia applications? How can the complexity of knowledge and of our cultural heritage be transferred and structured by the instruments of hypermedia? And what exactly is the polyvalence for knowledge transfer by using hypermedia? Hypermedia will change the perceptions of the museum visitor and the strategies of museum communication. Hypermedia is open, transient, interdisciplinary, process-related, discursive, and dependent on concept and context. Hypermedia is digital, multimedia-based, and extended by the interactivity with its recipient, the user. It is so diverse that is in need of documentation, analysis, and methodology in a wider sense. In this respect, hypermedia applications are comparable with works of contemporary art. The challenge is to reinterpret our traditional understanding of information as well as our understanding of knowledge transfer. At the moment, information about hypermedia in museums are mostly published as project-oriented articles in conference proceedings. Meanwhile, there are countless conferences and workshops held every year producing tons of grey literature. But there is lacking an analytical study in the sense of a scientific methodology, as well as an oeuvre catalogue with exemplary case studies for online and offline hypermedia applications in museums until today. What is missing is a critical canon. It looks that hypermedia will be a perfect terrain for research, and therefore I started my project after discussing it with some colleagues, like Xavier Perrault, Peter Samis, Holly Witchy, and Sarah Kenderdine, on the symposium Dramaturgy in Museum Communication, The Change of Meaning in Virtual Spaces, what a title, which I have organized during my time at the Swiss National Museum in Zurich. As you can see, Xavier had been not only a pioneer in multimedia, but also the real inventor of the Gangnam Style dance. Now is the right moment to tell you a little bit about myself and my motivation behind this project. In the last few years, I've produced a lot of different hypermedia applications. Working as an art historian in that field means, to me, to understand and analyze the process of creating new knowledge with the possibilities of digital technologies. Here's a screenshot of the database, the Swiss Dynamic Poster Engine demo on CD-ROM. As you can see, we have used tag clouds in 1998 to create keywords for the poster collection of the Design Museum in Zurich. In the same year, we have produced Vienna Walk demo. This prototype of an interactive film on DVD-ROM combines the possibilities of digital film, hypermedia, and the web. In 1998, it was a futuristic vision of real interactivity and an intelligent knowledge transfer in the field of cultural heritage, tourism, e-commerce. Here you can see Agent Pauline asking the scientist Werner Szymanowicz, what is the purpose of art? If you don't like his answer, you can send him an email without leaving the film. This is real interactivity. It was 98. Yeah. For the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna, I have realized the first CD-ROM about historicism and the pluralism of styles in the 19th century. The Virtual Transfer Musée Suisse is a strategy for online communication by interactive narratives in 5 languages for the Musée Suisse group. The objects of the museum collections became the narrators, and the stories they have to tell are part of the visitor's own life, like tolerance, xenophobia, and transitoriness. Different strategies and dramaturgies have been used to explain the deeper meaning of the artifacts. Later I will show an example. So now, this is a message to Mr. Silberman. On the CD-ROM Museum Schloss Kieburg, none other than the fictional moderator Dr. Google has invited the famous Swiss encyclopedist Johann Jakob Loy to a fictional TV talk show named Knowledge Without Limits. Loy and Google discuss the different methods of attaining knowledge in their respective centuries. The discussion takes up the following controversial questions. Do pupils still need a classical education considering the wealth of downloadable knowledge available on the web? In a special competition, Loy's knowledge-based lexicon competes against Dr. Google's search engine. Then both discuss the pros and cons of the different methods. Loy, searching facts is just one side, but to generate new knowledge, you need a little bit more, Dr. Google. You can't solely administrate the knowledge, you also have to practice and live it. Dr. Google, quite true, my old friend. But in today's world, it's not necessary to know everything. It's sufficient that you know where you can find the information you are looking for, as these are always available and searchable. By following Loy and Dr. Google, the user has learned that both systems of knowledge-based methods have their positive and negative aspects. For the Department of East Asian Art History of the University of Zurich, I've produced a learning course about Hanyu Pinyin. This means how to speak and write Pinyin, and how to transliterate Wei Giles into pinyin. Master Kungsi, the famous Confucius, oh, I like this name, it sounds like confusion. Confucius himself will be your teacher, and believe me, he looks mild, but he is a very, very strong teacher. You will find table with all characters, how to write and how to speak it. And there are a lot of exercises with different levels for the rookie as well as the champion. After surviving the test, Master Kungsi will give you advice. An ice cap 3 feet thick is not the result of one day, which means try again and this time try harder. In another part of the course, the students will find a map to learn the names of the provinces in China and 40 different audio memories to test the ability to combine the character with the pronunciation. As you can see, I have a lot of fun producing these things. So I combine the strengths of analytical thinking with the joyful designing of hypermedia applications together with a certain scientific curiosity, my passion to teach, and the ability of a critical eye. Since 1993, I'm collecting online and offline hypermedia applications, and in the last few years I have analyzed over 700 of them, entered their data into a database management system, developed a methodology for hypermedia documentation, and I'm still working on the creation of an oeuvre catalogue of case studies with 101 multimedia classics. Part of the database will be accessible on the web, but the results of this work will be first of all a book. It may be strange to write a book about hypermedia applications, but it must be a book because it is an instrument at the time of appearance, and later it will become a document. And for a lot of our colleagues in the academic world, it must be a book to make the invisible visible. So I show you something that the museologist Christoph Pomian had said in 2009. Objects are for perception, works are of art for emotion, and media for fun. Media are first of all for fun. In the last years, scientific research in the visual studies has been concentrated mostly on media art. Only if a commented oeuvre catalogue as a basic work will exist, hypermedia applications in museums will become as a kind of hypermedia archaeology, a new recent field of research in the visual media sciences and art media history. Digital media archaeology will be one of the sciences of our future. The whole project will give impulses to museology, museum communication, as well as art media history, media sciences, and other related disciplines. Hypermedia is influencing more and more the scientific research, the academic teaching, as well as the communication in museums and between museums, archives, and libraries. By using hypermedia applications in the teachings, the students will learn how to create a storyboard, navigate into knowledge, and design new cultural heritage. The gap between curators, scientists, media designer, and programmer can be bridged. New application areas like content provider in a museum or information designer of cultural heritage will be supported. So here are the contents of the book. As you can see, it will be not possible for me to talk about every chapter and subchapter. Nancy will kill me. Therefore, I will concentrate into two parts. First will be an overview into my method of analyzing hypermedia. Second, I would like to give an introduction to the chapter polyvalence. One of the reasons why I have started to produce hypermedia applications has been to learn more about the process of the making of it. But I was not only interested in production management, more in the theory behind it. So on the left side, you will find the different aspects of the analysis given by Garrett, Olsen, and Caseli, and on the right side is my structure for the analysis. As you can see, is the process of analyzing a hypermedia application much more complicated than the creation of it. All in all, I have defined over 20 different levels or layers to analyze the complexity of the whole. Let's have a look of one of the case studies and go back to the Virtual Transformity Swiss project. Yep. So we have 5 languages. We have Romansh, yeah? We have French, Italian, and English and German. Romansh is a language specific in Switzerland spoken by 8,000 people. I don't know how many of them has an internet account, but well. Oh. Yeah. Okay, there is it. Yeah, I just want to listen. You have to listen a little bit because I'm playing the bass clarinet. Okay. So here we are, the NODEM. At the beginning there is an animation. I explain it a little bit later. I just want to show it to you. Nothing happened. Oh, it can't be true. It's in the air. I can feel it. Okay, here we are again. Yeah, that's it. So that's Mauritius Ehrlich, Jewish and a socialist. He had to leave Vienna in 1938, and he has invented this furniture. It's a starter set for refugees. And I found a newsreel from 1945, which is explaining the usage of the instrument. Yeah, normally. When you all switch your computers off, maybe it helps. Well, but I have a plan B. You will like this plan. That's the reason why I have this masterpiece of, well, old-fashioned G4. I can show it on CD-ROM. So here we are, the NODEM. You see it's a little bit different because we have produced the CD as a web preview edition. Yeah.
Von einem Ausländer, der in der Schweiz Zuflucht gefunden hat, stammt die Idee zu dieser Notzimmergarnitur für Opfer des Krieges. In 2 Couchbetten verpackt finden wir einen Tisch, 4 Hocker, 2 Matratzen, einen Schrank, Koch- und Essgeschirr für 4 Personen. Das Schweizer Arbeiterhilfswerk hat als erste einheimische Organisation solche Garnituren herstellen lassen, um sie Bewohnern von Lyon zu übergeben, die der Krieg um ihr ganzes Hab und Gut gebracht hat.
Just another one, a quick one. the founder of IKEA, he will love it. And by clicking on this part, now the daughter of Mauritius Ehrlich, she's telling her part of the story. And she was a child, and she has been in Vienna in that time in 1983. And so there are a lot of chapters. So she's talking about it, and at the end, she's talking about the problem today, that refugees is a timeless problem, and we have it today as well. So here we have information about the object, literature, and the links. And so the CD-ROM is linked to the Flüchtlingskommissariat der Vereinten Nationen, United Nations, the refugee campaign, and so you can do something. Yeah. So now I will leave it because we are going back to the presentation.
What was the date of that CD-ROM?
2002 till 2003. 2002 is the date of the CD-ROM. Yeah. So the problem is the complexity, to bring the complexity down in a structure. And, well, where is the structure? Okay, that's the information architecture of that what we have seen. So we have 5 different levels. And on the first level, we have the flash animation and the main menu. Then on the second level, we have different kind of films. On the third level, the audio, the interview. And then the last level, text information. That means that at the beginning, it's not much information, but at the end, on the last level, it's a lot of information. So you can read the books, and you can leave the application and go to the website. This is the first step, so the information architecture. The next is navigation, interaction design, and media and material. The next is visual interface design. Next, sound design. And so on and so on. So you have 20 levels, 20 layers to analyze how you can analyze the CD-ROM. The message. So in the NODEM we will find 2 messages. The first message is Mauritius Ehrlich helped refugees by inventing a construction kit for furniture in 1945. The Swiss government supported him to produce 30,000 NODEM. The second message is the misery of refugees is timeless. Become a Mauritius Ehrlich in our time and help other people who are in poverty. So the artifact changed from a historic document to a powerful statement given by the museum. Another level is the audiovisual rhetoric, the visual grammar, and the pendant system. Well, the term pendant system, I haven't found an English translation. It's a technical name for the hang of paintings in a museum in the 19th century. It characterizes the correlation between the different parts of the hang. The pendant system is a fantastic synonym to explain hypermedia. But the pendant system exists also as an external choreography. Now we have an internal choreography, and I've made it a little bit like the hang of paintings in the 19th century to show the most important piece in the middle and the other ones. And that's this is now the NODEM related to other artifacts with political value, like slave trade and like child labor, in the collection of the Swiss National Museum. Richard Buchanan anticipated design as a way of rhetoric, communication, and interaction when he said in 1984, design is an art of thought directed to practical action through the persuasiveness of objects, and therefore design involves the vivid expression of competing ideas about life. Guy Bonziepe was the one who drafted in 1965 the elements of visual verbal rhetoric for graphic design. So the term audiovisual rhetoric seems to be predestinate for analyzing the syntax, so the form, and the semantic, content and meaning of the full particulars of hypermedia. But there is something more to discover than the pure rhetoric elements. This is the complex meaning of the whole hypermedia application, or rather the tone of the whole. Every application has its own visual, auditory, and interactive tone. As a sequence of different rhythms, in the sense of a Kraemer, it is designed by liquid information architecture and structured by a system of hyperlinks. Let's have an example. The CD-ROM Werner Pantone has been produced as 4 kiosk systems for the exhibition show at the Vitra Design Museum. Following the timeline in the chapter Biography, the user will get an introduction to the life of Pantone as well as an overview of his oeuvre. The second chapter, Pantone Chair, contains detailed information about the technical development and the differences in material mold and production of this famous single-piece chair, and give us information about its usage. It is the artifact itself who is the narrator. The third chapter, Interior Design, shows 4 legendary interiors by Pantone. All these projects, like Visiona, shown in 1970 on a Rhine cruiser, are presented in detail, including plans and photos. Interactive floor plans allow the user to see the interior from different angles of vision. This strategy of interactive voyeurism is like a voyage of discovery back in the 1970s. In textile design, the 4th chapter, the user gets an introduction to the foremost creative instruments for the design of textiles, color and geometric patterns. The screen holds 76 textile patterns, which can be grouped according to thematic considerations like op art or 3D. The last chapter, Pattern Game, is a clever supplement to textile design. 4 different patterns can be modified by numerous variations and can be compared with the original textile design of Pantone himself. So the game teaches the user how to compose ornamental textiles. With its 5 parts, the application about Werner Pantone is addressed to all kinds of visitor and user groups. The encyclopedist or the expert will find informations. The interested voyeur can make observations. The playful discoverer can play a game. So someone of the audience has asked for the meaning of ludic, and Johann Huizinga has published in 1939 a book with the title Homo Ludens, about the origin of culture in playing, and the ludic is coming from this Homo Ludens, from this book. All in all, the user will get a mixture of basic documentation of Pantone's philosophy and an incomplete oeuvre catalogue of his design in the 1960s and 70s. Furthermore, it is a source book to create new patterns. The CD-ROM about the Danish designer Werner Pantone is an excellent example of how dramaturgy, navigation, and design gear together in a synergetic way. It will show us that a hypermedia application is more than the sum of its parts, and it is a rare example for the integration of all categories of user. Last chapter. If the most successful way to transfer information is the creation of a confidential relation, then the primary objective has become to define strategies by using the visitor's own experiences, preferences, and curiosity. To capture the visitor's feeling of solidarity by empathy will be the key to create polyperspective readings and hyperlink structures. Yeah, I need the end. The secret of acceptance is to visualize the visitor's hidden needs in a sensitive and inspiring dramaturgy. If this is accepted by the user, viewer, or visitor, all hypermedia applications will become successful and typify the merit of education. Traditional narratives use a linear structure, pushing a single storyline, while hypermedia applications need a network of hyperlinked mini-stories targeted at different user groups and versatile enough to be used in different fields of application. Furthermore, the narratives in hypermedia applications use a type of language combining a verbal rhetoric with visual rhetoric to create a cognitive design. To unify content, navigation, and design, it is necessary for the designer to realize a sort of visual intelligence, but also demands hypermedia competence of the user. Interactivity, the multiple choices of digital one-way streets, encompasses the intention to participate in both creativity and confrontation. The first signifies a joyful collaboration, the second a clash with the system. Real interactivity thus grows out of the actuality of an action. It is productivity that leads to the creation of reality and the meaning of perception. The best navigation is content in itself and not merely a simplified application of the content. Thus, information architecture should create different levels of context and animate the user to construct meaning autonomously. Readability is therefore directly dependent on the experiences and personal needs of the user, him or herself. Timeless questions need contemporary, in our case, hypermedial answers. Just telling interactive stories is not enough. In a film, each individual sequence is responsible for the rhythm of the story and the dynamics of the actions. The eye of the viewer easily ends up being bored if there is no change of scene and no variety to the shots. To subdue the visual ennui, a diverse and eventful dramaturgy is necessary. The real challenge of such a dramaturgy is going to be to find a way to design motivating modules of content with an overall visual and acoustic concept. So how can we catch the attention of the user? How can we decelerate the dynamics of the user attitudes? And how can we simplify the complexity of the information by not losing its value? Dramaturgy in a film is the correct application of pacing, of rapid pulse beats, and then pausing for a moment. This means that the story is not only used as a narrative, but also as a way of design. To transfer this strategy into the liquid architecture of hypermedia means to understand the principle of simultaneity in non-simultaneity. Larry Friedlander has shown us that the problems encountered when we try to communicate information about art are not art-specific, but essential for the common transfer of knowledge. How can we analyze the structure of such a hybrid experience, and how can we better design this kind of complex space? How do we integrate media-rich environments with people-rich ones and make them human, warm, and conducive to learning? And how do we organize these experiences for the user so they can make sense of them without robbing them of their inherently rich and spontaneous qualities? Consequently, it is important to learn how to accelerate and decelerate the flow of information at the right moment, as well as learning how to lead the user with a storyline and equally through a navigational design. It should be possible to create a work that is at the same time complex yet still intuitive. In my talk, some of the provocations for a new grammar of hypermedia has been shown. A typology containing all possible categories has to document what has happened as well as what will follow. Still yet, documentation is retrospective. The numerous means of hypermedia design allow an imaginative, innovative, inventive information design, which is meant to be intuitive in its usage. Any new project still needs to define its own rules in accordance with the goals of the side project. In this interplay of content and dramaturgy, navigation and design lie the challenges for the co-determination of the hypermedia future and for the documentation. So let's end with the hidden wise secret behind hypermedia. Tao Yao, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. I told y'all this was going to be awesome, and it exceeded even my expectations. So, shall we open the floors for a couple of minutes of questions? One of the things that I tweeted about while you were talking was the wonderful conversation that we had on Sunday and your explanation of why you feel it's so important that all of this digital archaeology needs to be transmitted to future generations as an old-fashioned printed book. Might you like to elaborate on that a little bit? And maybe you can come to this.
I can elaborate.
Well, it was Sunday, I can't remember.
I mean, I can talk a little bit about that because the last chapter of my print-based book is called The Work of a Book in a Digital Age. And it's partly, I think, resonates with your first montage of how ephemeral the digital is, but how much in denial we are about its ephemeral status. And I truly believe that the only thing that will last of my 20-year portfolio of digital objects is the print-based book. So I wrote the book as an archival piece to put in place the both the reflection on what were the theoretical preoccupations that I took into the design experience, and then I finished the book as the last gesture of my design process, which was to look back at what had been designed, to then reflect on whether my preoccupations, so it was where the book was the moment to reflect on where theory and practice actually had an argument, and what in theoretical terms I came in hoping to do, or what was theoretically my objective, and where in practice theory lost. That what was possible to do was not possible. I mean, what was possible to think theoretically was not possible to do in practice. And the book documents or archives that conversation that I think is at the heart of all design.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I started in Bern at the university, the professor asked me, what are you doing exactly? I said, well, I'm interested in hypermedia. He said, oh, that sounds great to me. Can you look, something's wrong with the printer? Well, that's a problem. For them, it's invisible. And a book is visible. Yeah, they can use it, they can open it, they can read. They say, oh, wow, there is an ISBN number on it. It must be a book. Yeah. But hypermedia, well.
Without an ISBN, it doesn't really exist. In certain academic circles and others. Yeah.
Building. Sorry, thank you. Building a little bit from what Neil had done to what you had presented here. Your conversation was very much focused on culture. Mm-hmm. Cultural heritage isn't the term that appeared. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was purposeful or not. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that it seemed to be so tied in to the remembrance of an emotional experience and the emotional memory that will carry forward, as opposed to a more empirical, sort of intellectualized history. And I was wondering if you could tell the difference between dealing with something like that mm-hmm. and something that I would consider more tangible. Because it seems like the essence of what you're doing mm-hmm. was really intangible heritage, although the manifestation was a tangible quilt.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a great question, and it giving me an opportunity to think about this. I was talking with Neil and saying that one of the one of the groups that I have not talked a lot with are groups that are kind of centrally engaged in questions of cultural heritage. That's in part because that group is not, just hasn't been part of my kind of institutional kind of colleagues and so on. So being here was really exciting about that. Second of all, one is I hadn't really had many conversations on the particular topic, cultural heritage. On the second notion about why the term culture and not cultural heritage, when you talk about an artifact of culture like the AIDS Memorial quilt, there is no bounded culture for whom this artifact represents. It is an artifact of in the most democratic of senses. I mean, it was not produced by members who would recognize themselves as part of a culture. So it's like, whose heritage is the quilt? For a long time, for many years, and partly this explains the lack of funding, people projected that it belonged to the cultural heritage of gay men. But of course, gay men were not the only ones who were commemorated on the quilt, nor were they the only ones dying of HIV/AIDS, nor were they, so in part the question about whose heritage it is, if there isn't a people or a boundedness to their experience. I mean, they're they're connected, the people who are commemorated, and then those who have made the panels, and then those the loved ones. They are connected by an epidemic, not by the things that we would consider to be the infrastructures of culture: kinship, religion, modes of expression, rituals, traditions. They are bounded. This artifact binds people in and makes a culture, but it's a culture in a very, it's not culture in a traditional sense. And so that's where the question of heritage has been really, I'm not going to say problematic, but difficult, because this wasn't a gay man's cultural artifact. And that was part of the problem in getting funding for a long time. People thought it was a niche project. It was a special interest project, even as we were seeing and receiving, quilt panels from around the world and so on and so forth, heterosexuals, babies, children, and so on. But because we had a different notion of what this artifact was, and then the relationship of artifact to culture. So how the artifact constitutes a culture it's not even a diasporic culture. It constitutes a group of people whose only connection is that they are connected through this epidemic. So that's, yeah. Oh, and yes, I mean the emotional. I mean, I don't know if there was a question or a comment, but yeah, but I think that that part of what we noted when looking at the textile quilt was that it is an incredibly emotionally evocative artifact. Whether or not you, as a viewer, have a name or a kin or relationship to someone, that's commemorated on the panels, the presence and the scale, the size of the quilts, the scale, have a profound kind of emotional impact on people, even if they don't have a personal history. And that's, I think, that was one of the critical kind of parts of the experience design, was how do you, in the digital, evoke an emotional experience. And we didn't know with our forebrain how that was going to happen in our, how it played out was the emotional experience got provoked when someone looked at that bird's side view, which is a sea of of a virtual quilt, and the zooming experience of clicking somewhere in that bird's eye view sea of mosaic quilt panels, and when the zoom kind of shows an individual panel, that was the poetics of the digital experience that I can't say we designed with our forebrain, but it is that poetic moment of engagement that was about the emotional